What's up everybody, this is BR here, and today I've got some terrible news. Diablo Immortal, the laughingstock of Blizzard, is successful. With its loot box monetization scheme, it has earned over $24 million, and that is truly depressing. Depressing not only for the PC Diablo fans who wanted a legitimately new installment, rather than a Skinner box mobile game, and that many international markets are just rife with exploitation. But what the hell am I talking about? What do I mean that international markets are being exploited by game companies? But first, I'm going to need you to think about the differences between console games and mobile games, specifically on how they're monetized. Because of the controversies that happened over the past 10 years having to do with monetization in video games, console games have been pretty alright when it comes to monetization in the big picture. Things like loot boxes are no longer a thing, and that's honestly pretty good because it's no longer gambling. Sure, we do get these overpriced skins, but at the very least, it's something that you can actually choose that isn't so much exploitative. Not to mention that most online games have gone the route of the battle pass, which, again, not the most appealing solution, but it's way much better than playing a virtual slot machine. You know, and that's great for us here in the US. We don't have to suffer with a lot of the vices that used to exist in the monetization market. At least not as much. And if a game comes out that goes over the line with monetization, you can rest assured that many people will go out of their way to call them out on their bullshit. Especially gaming media, for whatever that's worth. So game companies are kept more in check when it comes to the US market. Now compare that to many mobile games, and we already know that mobile games are just infamous for their terrible monetization schemes. Most, if not all, big mobile titles are scientifically and mathematically calculated to try to squeeze as much money out of a person as possible. Some are even infamous for having teams to research what makes a game super addicting in order to hook as many people as possible. But you might say, well, that's not actual evidence that they're exploiting international markets, that just shows that they're exploiting everyone. Except here's the thing, let me tell you a little about international markets. You see, most countries that are not first world Western nations don't have the opportunity to buy game consoles or PCs, and this could be due to a multitude of reasons. Either because of high taxes and tariffs, like the reason why Nintendo left Brazil, or because culturally, computers are still very much just office machines rather than something you would have at the home. And this is usually due because of their high prices. Not to mention that the secondhand market is also very terrible for many of those other countries because, again, high taxes and tariffs. They can't import stuff from the United States because that stuff is usually heavily tariffed. But you know what is widely accessible around the world? Smartphones. While most people around the world don't have the opportunity to get game consoles and PCs from last generation, most people have access to mobile phones that are just good enough to play games. Either because culturally phones are seen as more of a necessity compared to a PC or a games console, or government systems that help people get smartphones since, again, they might be seen as a necessity. In fact, many of the mobile markets of these other nations have exploded over the past 10 years. India in particular has exploded over the past 10 years with the mobile devices, making it the most popular, if not the only piece of technology in Indian homes. So now we see that the gaming market in the smartphones really is lucrative, but it is not at all ethical. Everything that gamers have called exploitative by companies here in the US are readily available in these mobile games, and these game companies can just pretty much make a huge profit out of them. And that's pretty much the reason why many game companies are making mobile ports of most of their games. If you look at every single mobile release, from games like Call of Duty to Apex Legends Mobile, they always test out the games in markets that are not the US. In fact, the US is usually the last place to ever get access to these games. Because by the time the game reaches us and we start complaining, they've already made $24 million. But as unethical as these game companies are, how do these other markets just let it happen? Why aren't they up in arms about it? Why aren't they demanding something better that's not a Skinner box? Well, first off, they don't really have the opportunity to. Most of these markets are hindered by economic policies that make it extremely hard to get better hardware. Not to mention that most other countries are just not as wealthy as the US. Not saying that's how it's supposed to be, I'm just saying that's how it is. And smartphones not only being a necessity, but incredibly cheap compared to something like a PC, or even a games console, of course that's what they're gonna prefer playing their games on. And secondly, well, that's just how things have always been. Because most international markets haven't had the opportunity to experience the gaming market like here in the US, most people's experience is just Skinner box after Skinner box. hey, at least it's free. It doesn't really matter if it's, nickel and diming me to death with its psychological manipulation. There literally isn't anything else. So while Diablo Immortal gaining a lot of money, and also including pretty much every other mobile game making a lot of money with their very much unethical practices, I am honestly not surprised. If anything, I'm just severely disappointed because it appears that this is gonna just continue being a problem until, well, probably the end of time. I really don't think that game consoles are going to become more accessible over the next, I don't know how many years. The mobile phone game market is just extremely lucrative and way too profitable for any big game company to ever let go. So that's pretty much the end of this discussion. And I'd really like to get your opinion on this, especially from those of you who are in these international markets where mobile phone gaming is pretty much your only avenue for gaming. And keep in mind that my gripe doesn't have to do anything with the games themselves, rather it's more the scummy practices that free-to-play games usually do, like with loot boxes and timed content. But please, tell me your opinion in the comment section down below. If you found this video interesting, like it if you like it, dislike it if you disliked it, and if you want to see more content like this, consider subscribing, and have a wonderful 4th of July.